Thanks so much for these welcoming words. I think that's basically the most important outline that we just heard. On the one hand, setting the standard globally when it comes to environmental action and circularity, while at the same time unearthing the potential or the competitiveness potential of digitalization. I think that's the main theme also currently as we are on a whole big perspective reworking, for example, the Green Deal and looking already into the Industrial Clean Act or Clean Industrial Act. Now the big question is, usually it takes a long time to put policy into action. We all know it's a slow process, it's a lot of people involved. But if we look in the world, specifically in the last 2 to 3 weeks, we can really see it's hard to keep up with the global geopolitics. The changes are so fast moving. Things that have been a given for 70 years suddenly are put into question. Now, what does that mean specifically for the topic that we're discussing today? That is exactly the question we have with our next speaker. She is a specialist for environmental questions, circularity on a global perspective. She has a cutting-edge global perspective on geopolitics, specifically to our topics, because she actually has been now Program Director at PACE, so the platform for accelerating the circular economy, and is now the global lead for energy, minerals and circularity at the World Resource Institute. Please welcome Ke Wang.
Good morning. I'm very excited to join this closing event of Battery Pass, and the chemistry in the room is great. I'm looking forward to learning all the great achievements, being probably one of the least technology-savvy person in the room. Well, yeah, if you find yourself reading the title of my talk more than once and wonder what this will be about, don't worry, it happened to me as well. Actually, out of curiosity, I put this title into ChatGPT and say, hey, can you make a 15-minute speech for me? And it did so in less than a second. It produced a speech that covered all the keywords. It talked about smart grids, Internet of Things, AI, blockchain, digital twins, in the context of energy transition, and about how the transition is not just switching to renewable sources, but also a systems change, and how all the digital technologies can make the energy transition more competitive for countries and businesses. Well, it was a pretty good speech, but of course, I do not want to give a talk written by AI, not yet, right? So I felt quite challenged to write my own and to take a completely different angle, which was not easy. I was certainly much less efficient. It took me hours instead of seconds. And I feel maybe, in the future, very soon, we should start labeling content as brain-made, just like we've been labeling crafts as handmade, right? They take longer to produce. They might feel a bit more crude, but I hope, people will still see value in it because somehow feels a bit more authentic and human. Well, we're witnessing an enormous digital technology innovation wave at a speed and a scale that nobody has ever seen before. Digital technologies have already changed our way of life, and it will continue to do so even more profoundly, actually in ways that is difficult for us to imagine. So we look back into the history to see if we can get some clues to peek into the future. We see that throughout history, technology has been created usually to solve one problem. But once it's created and start to spread, it will be used in many more ways and create also impact well beyond the original imagination and intention of its creators. For example, lots of people from Germany, Nicholas Otto, the inventor of the internal combustion engine, actually wanted to use it for water pumps. He never imagined this could be used in personal cars and transformed personal mobility forever. And then the pioneers of cars, Carl Benz, who invented the cars, and Henry Ford, who really scaled cars into mass production was very much focused on solving the personal mobility issue. And they would have never imagined that one day their cars will become a major contributor to the climate change issue worldwide. Actually, in the early days, internal combustion engine cars was good for the environment, right? Because it solved the city streets from pollution by horse manure. Similarly, the creators of electric vehicles were very much focused on solving the emissions issue, and probably also didn't think that one day it will put lithium graphite at the world center stage that is deciding the future of the Russia-Ukraine war. So my point is, although technologies are created with a specific intended use, in reality they can be and they will be used in many different ways and create impact that's well beyond what we originally think. Now, what do all these have to do with battery passports? That's why we're here today. Well, I think we'll be spending most of today discussing how battery passport can be made, can be achieved. But I would like to step back and ask 4 questions, which I hope the battery passport community have been considering, or maybe it might provoke some more thinking and debates. The first question is an easy one. Why do we want a battery passport? Or in other words, what is the intended use? And I think, as Tilman already said, the answer should not just be compliance to regulations, right? Because regulation compliance is not the end goal itself, it's a means towards a goal. As previous speakers already pointed out, for many people, the main reason we want a battery passport or digital product passport is to make the supply chain more responsible. We want to know the environmental and the social impacts of associated with the manufacturing of batteries, all the way up to mineral extraction. We want to know not only the carbon footprint of these processes, but we also want to know whether there's any violation of human rights, child labor, forced labor, biodiversity loss was involved. And we believe such transparency will hold the battery supply chain accountable. It will empower downstream buyers, such as car industries or consumers, to favor more responsibly produced batteries, and therefore improve the ESG performance along the value chain over time. For example, transparency and traceability will be a key technology enabler for the much discussed concept of green premium, which means the buyers will pay a higher price for more responsibly produced minerals. And to do that, the fundamental assumption is that we'll be able to know the lithium, the cobalt, the nickel in a specific battery, where do they come from and how they were mined and processed. So my second question is, if we agree that enhancing ESG performance is the primary reason why we want a battery passport, then what is needed to achieve that intended goal? Well, we obviously need technology development, right? We need the technical system that Battery Pass Consortium have been developing. We need to agree on the standards of how data should be calculated and collected. The Global Battery Alliance is working, doing a lot of work on developing rule books for that. But besides all these, it will be crucial that people are willing to use it. The companies along the value chain needs to be willing to spend the time collecting and sharing the data, and the buyers of the batteries need to be willing to use the data to steer their purchasing decisions. And so far, the EU regulations, including the battery regulation, the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSDDD, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, have been a powerful driver for companies to improve ESG performance and adopt a digital passport. But we know that EU is about to significantly cut back its sustainability regulations. Tomorrow, the Omnibus package will be announced, which combines and simplifies the 3 regulations, the previously mentioned CSRD, CSDDD, and the EU taxonomy. it is expected that many companies may be exempted from sustainability reporting. So under such radical shifts in the regulatory landscape, we need to ask, will the companies be able to hold up their ESG ambition and willing to engage in passports, digital passports? And what other forces there might be to keep up the ambition, and will they be strong enough? That brings me to my third question, is in what other ways may battery passport or digital product passport be used? One of the use for battery passport is for recyclers to know what materials are in the battery and how much. It can also provide information on the state of health of the battery to help decide whether a retired EV battery can be reused in storage applications. And these will be very valuable boosters for circularity. And another use might be in the diversification of critical mineral supply. So critical minerals have been in the news for years and just have made into the headlines when President Trump asked Ukraine for a minerals deal in exchange for its past and continued security support. And battery is one of the major users of critical minerals, right? It's not the only one, but it is one of the important users. The supply chain of the critical minerals has been very concentrated geographically, and the countries in the West, such as the US and EU, have been very keen to diversify that supply. Both US and EU have been taking substantial actions to encourage more minerals to be produced domestically or in allied countries. So there's a strong political appetite or desire for made in EU or made in US minerals. And the digital product passport can play an important role there. Well, these are just two examples, right? Probably neither is perfect and neither will do full justice to the might and the power of a battery passport system. I think there will be many more use cases and probably uses that is beyond the wildest guess of any of us in this room. So I can hear some of you thinking, but are we going to like all these uses, right? So this leads to my last question. How might these uses impact the world? So we need to brainstorm on all these potential uses, which is a business development exercise, right? But it also would enable us to start imagining what the impacts might be. We'll never be able to foresee all the uses, and we'll never be able to foresee all the possible impacts. But it does not mean we should not at least try. Well, Benz and Ford could have never foreseen that the cars will contribute to climate change. But the possible impact of mineral-intensive key technologies on geopolitics tension could have been foreseen, was foreseen actually, because we've seen it happening with oil and gas. And in the example of using battery passport to favor minerals produced with a lower environmental impact, one such indirect, unintended impact could be, hey, will this exclude lower income countries which might not have the money or the know-how to switch to more greener production? Will this take revenue away from these countries which are very much dependent on their mineral export revenue? And will they restrict them from benefiting from the energy transition? Right? So these are questions we should ask and debate. By understanding what impacts there might be, then we can think about how to manage the technologies and the uses to avoid or mitigate the undesirable impacts. About to end, this may be a less usual speech, but that's because we live in a very unusual time. The world has changed significantly from when battery pass was first started 3 years ago. Actually, the world is quite different from how it was just a month ago, right? That's when Tilman and I first started discussing about my contribution to this event. So new risks are emerging at a very high pace and a great scale. But new risks also lead to new opportunities. I'm a believer and a supporter of greater supply chain transparency. So I'd like to see battery passport stick and spread. But exactly because of that, that's why I would like to encourage us to think hard and reimagine frequently the use cases, the drivers, and the impact of digital passport system. The need is greater than ever now. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ke, for joining us. We actually made good on time, so I'll just use this opportunity for a quick follow-up question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Because I proudly announced this really is paving the way, maybe even globally, for example, with DKE 99100, maybe flowing or being the basis for a global standard. From your global perspective, would you back up that claim? What do you see happening in other regions towards that end?
That's a very good question. So different regions have their own initiatives in creating a similar kind of battery system. So in India, for example, has its own battery ID system. China has its own battery ID system. And the GBA is a global effort trying to connect different initiatives. So I think it is very important for this concept to work, that there is interoperability or certain harmonization, collaboration among all these different initiatives. But the challenge is in today's world, where multilateralism is giving way to more country-led initiatives, whether we will need new mechanisms to collaborate and harmonize, right?
So the big next step will be then taking this effort, seeing what everybody else has been up to, and that word is, I love it, interoperability. I always have to think hard while speaking it.
I can never get it right. Interoperability.
Yes. Interoperability. That's the next big challenge. Thanks a lot, Ke Wan.
Thank you.